Hi, got you. I bet you were clicking on this video expecting me to talk to you about the worst game ever, but no, this is instead a tangent, a rant about people who overuse the term worst game ever. I got you. I got inside your head. The only reason this video exists is because I remembered all the people who were claiming Mindjack and Ride to Hell Retribution, claiming they were the worst games ever. And I mean, if you've even played games for a short period of time, you know that's not true. You just poke around on the Steam library, or if you've ever been to Newgrounds at all, or, Xbox Live Indie Games, you know that Ride to Hell Retribution and Mindjack are not the worst games ever. So instead of playing the worst game ever, we're going to play my least favorite game. It's not the worst game because I have the cognitive ability to recognize that my least favorite game is not the worst game in existence, that there is a distinction between those two things. There are definitely games that are far more broken than this one that objectively work less well, but I don't like this one at all. So the idea behind this mission is to protect a Jeep from enemy fire. So that reticle was freaking out a moment. That happens a lot. Let's go ahead and get right into the reasons I don't like this game. And there are some pretty good reasons behind it. It's not just a personal taste thing. So this game is Army Men Soldiers of Misfortune, and it was originally a Wii title. That's why the reticle looks so weird and freaks out so often, is because you're supposed to control it with the Wii pointer. But this is instead the PS2 port of the original Wii title. And they didn't bother to change up the controls for the PS2 version. So when I move the pointer to the edge of the screen, it doesn't actually move the camera. In order to move the camera, I have to move Timmy's body. Timmy is our protagonist. So, yeah, I have to move Timmy's body to move the camera. I can't move the camera with the right stick at all, even though the reticle is moved with the right stick. I just said that twice so you understand how terrible it is. And secondly, Timmy has tank controls. This controls like a PlayStation 1 third-person shooter, but worse. Much worse than that. The aiming is so terrible. The reticle is very imprecise, and oftentimes I just move Timmy's body instead of moving the reticle, because it's easier to move his body than it is the reticle. Yeah, it's that bad. But we're not out of awful control layout park yet. No, there's one more thing. This game does have a strafe function. If you hold down L2 and move the control stick left or right, you strafe. The problem with this is that sometimes the strafe deactivates even though you're still definitely holding the L2 button. And another issue is that the strafe moves you slightly forward, even if you're only moving left to right. So if you're trying to strafe and fire at an enemy, you will slowly inch toward them, even though you do not want to move toward them at all. Now that we're out of Bad Control Park finally, let's talk about the enemies. The enemies are capable of very easily chewing away at your health, especially if multiple of them are firing at you at a time, and they have a tendency to spawn behind you, which is a little frustrating. There are a very limited number of health kits in each level, and they don't show up on your minimap. Objectives and enemies show up on your minimap, but not things you might want, like health kits or ammo refills. So it's very easy to die, especially in levels where there are more concentrated enemies firing at you instead of the Jeep. And yeah, you do need to refill your ammunition. And that's equally frustrating because those are hidden everywhere throughout the map too. Also, your darts have lesser range than the enemy's darts. There is a distinct lack of perfectly reliable cover, as sometimes the enemies will shoot through cover very clearly. In this mission in particular, sometimes the Jeep will take damage even though you won't see any darts hit it, and sometimes from enemies that should be physically incapable of shooting the Jeep as they are behind something at the time. The Jeep's health does refill if it's left alone long enough, but it's never left alone long enough. You can never hold the enemies off long enough for the Jeep to refill its health. There's always something shooting at it from some direction. And this level seems to be never-ending. I know it's not technically never-ending, but it just takes so long to kill every enemy. And I don't know how many you have to kill before the level ends because I've never finished this level, and I don't think anyone else ever has either. Looking this game up on the internet, most of the footage is from the first level exclusively. I don't believe anyone else has gotten this far in the game. And there are presumably vehicle sections in the game, because that's a thing that the instruction manual promised me, was vehicle sections. But I will never see the vehicle sections because I will never finish this level. It just won't be done. I don't have the motivation for it, and I have a lot of patience for subpar video games that many people consider shovelware. I generally don't consider them shovelware. For example, many people would probably consider Sid the Dummy shovelware. I do not. Did you see a dart hit that Jeep? Because I didn't. So let's go back to a level I can actually finish, the first one, and we'll play that level instead. Speaking of Sid the Dummy, this game was made with the Vicious engine, just as Sid the Dummy was. And I believe the Vicious engine is very easy to use, which is why some really subpar games with questionable game design end up getting made there. Anyway, the first mission is a lot more simple. We just have to run around the level and grab all the supply crates, which are marked blue on our minimap. The game, in addition to having poor design, is also very boring and tiresome. All of the levels feel like a huge chore, like they take far more time than they actually do. And I can't believe that there is more than one song in the game. There are supposedly 3 locations in the game, but I refuse to believe there's more than just this one song. You know, if anyone ever does actually finish this game, that would be impressive. I finished a lot of games for the first time on this channel that no one else has ever finished. Like, I was the first person to record a playthrough of Sid the Dummy. I was the first person to record a playthrough of Abalaburn? I don't know how you pronounce that. First person to record a playthrough of Hidden Invasion. You know, a lot of firsts, a lot of games that would have been forgotten if I didn't do something. But I have no desire to give this game the same treatment, because I just don't see any care in this one. I can't believe that someone actually cared about it. It doesn't seem like it. I actually think this game may go unfinished forever. I don't know, maybe someday I'll play the Wii version, and that version will be less infuriating, so I can play that one and actually finish it, but I doubt it. So I've run out of things to say about Army Men Soldiers of Misfortune. We can talk about the earlier Army Men games, which I really liked. They're not good games. Well, some of them are actually very good games, but a lot of them people consider subpar to awful. But I like almost every Army Men game that came out before this one, almost every single one. So this is like a big slap in the face in particular, because the Army Men license was never, was never used for anything outstanding, but it's better than this. The Vicious engine is also better than this, but, you gotta give your engine to people who pay for it. I don't know, I mean, when you look at Mindjack, do you honestly think, yeah, Mindjack looks worse than this? Because Mindjack isn't worse than this, and neither is Ride to Hell, or any of the other really popular bad games that come floating around every so often, mostly from 7th gen. 8th gen has way fewer of those. Another example I can think of is for the Switch, this indie Japanese driving game came out called Room in the Night Sky, and a lot of people are labeling that one of the worst games ever made as well, and it's just not. And I'm not sure why people feel the need to be so sensationalist about completely mundane things. This makes me wonder if, like, the original Driver came out in the 7th gen, the original Driver with slightly fixed up graphics, so, it wasn't clearly a PS1 game. If Driver came out during the 7th gen instead of 4th gen, do you think people would call that one of the worst games ever made? Because it has all the ingredients, it's really difficult and obtuse. The tutorial is something few people will ever finish, for example. But it's not a bad game, and certainly not the worst game ever made. I meant 5th gen, by the way, not 4th gen. I know the difference, there are just so many generations of video games now. Hopefully we're nearing the end. Do you get the humor? Do you get the humor of this video that you clicked on a video labeled worst game ever? and instead it's a man talking really calmly about how he's frustrated with people who make videos about the worst games ever, which are clearly not, and are instead just sensationalized. I hope you get the humor. You see, the humor is ironic. It plays on your expectations so thoroughly, like 12 minutes of thoroughness. You know, Superman 64's flight control's not that bad. Like, if you ever played a driving video game in your life, then you should be able to control Superman 64's flight perfectly fine. Now, the game itself, yeah, still awful. Objectively very, very awful, but this game definitely controls worse than Superman 64's flight. Now, Superman 64's melee combat, that could give this a run for its money, but Superman 64's flight, yeah, that's fine. That controls fine. Man, there are so many third-person shooters for 7th Gen that a lot of people really hated that I liked a bunch. There was Mindjack and Dark Void and Resident Evil Operation Raccoon City and Damnation and Never Dead, and I know I'm missing one because there are 6. Oh yeah, and Fracture. You know, those are thoroughly despised games of the 7th generation. And, you know, some of them really aren't very good. I'm not going to contest, for example, that they're all masterpieces or anything, but this game I'm playing right now, definitely worse than all of those, definitely. And this, again, is not the worst game ever made either. Is this toilet paper we're stepping on? It looks like it, that or a paper towel. I love when the reticle gets stuck in the environment. Even though I like all of those 6 games I listed, I really, really don't like Fracture's story. Fracture's story is awful, and it rubs me the wrong way on a moral level. I mean, that's not why it's awful. It can rub me the wrong way on a moral level and still not be bad, but it's bad. If anyone's curious what my second least favorite game is, it's VeggieTales Larry Boy and the Bad Apple. Much a better game than this one. Probably nothing technically wrong with it. Everything functions as intended. It's just really, really boring. So boring. Oh, we're done. Level's over. Hope you had a good time.